Seems like a pretty eclectic group of tight ends you've brought in that we're going to kind of pair in terms of body types and abilities. What do you think of just the uniqueness of how many different guys you kind of brought in and what they bring to the table?
It's a good question. Really like all the kind of skill sets that they have that are here. You know, Lonnie's a guy that's on campus already, and so he's starting to get a chance to work out with our guys. He's flashed some athletically, so excited about that. He's got to get his body in position to be able to handle, you know, how we play in this league. But it's good to have him here and get that started. Tripp's a guy. You know, I think that they were all guys that we saw on film. We were able to, now that we're back in the evaluation process, you know, COVID was such a screwy 2 years. Now that we're back in position where we go see them, and we were able to get them both on campus in a situation where we could, you know, evaluate them from kind of like a camp standpoint. So that was some of those, I don't know if they're questions, but, you know, you've got this entire list of what it is that you want in your offense, right? You see what you can see on tape, you match that to how the body works, and then you try to figure out, all right, these things that I haven't seen on tape, not necessarily that I've seen that he can't or seen that he can, but I just haven't seen them. How do I get us in a position to see them? And that's kind of what camp's for. You know, you come in here, okay, well, I know he can do this part of it. Let me see if he can do this part of it, work him at that piece. And so we were able to do that with both Lonnie and Tripp. Adam's a little bit different guy that, you know, he was a guy that's super explosive, you know, crazy on tape, had early, was really in it deep with Louisville, Cincinnati, some of those types of schools. You know, we just kind of, our guys from down there did a good job carrying it on there till the end, and he wanted to take a visit. He had been here. The strength with that is he had been here with the 7-on-7 team a couple of times, not maybe to see us necessarily, but had been on SMU's campus, so he had some familiarity with around here. And so brought him and his mom up, and it just ended up being a great fit. Like you said, they're three very different players, but they all kind of blend into what it is that we're looking for out of that 11 personnel tight end that we like, and can give you some kind of unique development. Gives you a wide opportunity of guys that can have success in this thing. They're all three really good kids, you know, good grades, and have an opportunity to work with those guys.
When you factor in the running backs you guys brought in, the offensive linemen that you brought in, does that change kind of how you guys are starting to plan for next year, just in terms of maybe being a little bit more run heavy, or just what you can even do with run schemes?
Well, you know, one thing that I think that Coach Lashley and I learned both early in our career is having a versatility. You got to fit the offense to what your personnel is, you know, and the best coaches do that. The best coaches figure out what you're good at, and you do that, you know. So there is conversation about what it is that we can do. We're still kind of in our self-scout mode right now of, boy, what were we good at last year? You know, so our guys that are back do have some experience doing what it is that we do. What do we feel good about plugging in the personnel that we've got? Obviously, we're going to have some new starters and new faces on this offensive line. Could potentially be a more athletic offensive line than we've had. The size is kind of what we want, you know, and it'll be interesting to see. Obviously, I think Preston, you heard Coach Brewer speak about it in there earlier. Obviously, it's going to be driven a lot by what our quarterback can do, and so seeing where Preston develops this spring, and what strengths he brings out of our offense, and what it is that we want to do. You know, we've really upgraded, we think, our athleticism for sure, and that's not just at receiver, that's also at offensive line, like you mentioned, at tailback. We really like those guys that are in here now, and going to generate some competition that maybe we didn't have that kind of competition edge last for sure, not last spring, and even some in the fall camp, you know. So we'll have a chance to get those guys going, and long way around saying yes. I mean, I do think that we could do that, but I mean, we've got, we know what we want to be good at. We know what our core is. We know what's in our heart and our DNA, you know, about what it is that we want to do offensively, and then we got to make sure that we do a good job of fitting our personnel to that.
With the offensive line, you bring in a lot of people. You also have a couple guys, I think the 2 transfers that aren't here yet are offensive linemen. Mm-hmm. How do you work with them remotely and then make sure they're up to speed and create that competition with a couple guys with a lot of experience?
That's limited, obviously, with what it is that you can do. We can do as much as we can virtually, and we'll do that. And I know we've sent them, you know, Coach Grizz does a great job getting them information about what it is that our expectations are from a physical training standpoint when they show up on campus. Coach Justice will do a good job. And positionally, we all have to have some sort of, hey, this is the baseline information you need to know when you set foot on campus. That way, June 1st, you've got some awareness of what's going on. It's not just clueless to banging into stuff. You know what I mean? So, but those guys, their investment. RJ Maryland walked on this campus June 6th of last year, knew a little bit, really wasn't very good, but as expected, went to vacation for 3 weeks and he studied his butt off. And I came back mid-July and he was an entirely different player just in a 6-week period, So obviously you saw, how his season developed there. So I think we've got serious football players. I think we got guys that are serious about competing to play right away for our team. Obviously transfers, but even the freshman guys. And so I think that we're recruiting the type of player that you want in an environment that's a hyper-competitive year-round environment. And so these guys are going to take advantage of that.
You've been a recruiting coordinator. How tough was this year's process from a recruiting standpoint and organization compared to things you've been a part of in the past?
I don't envy it. I'm obviously was there at Coach Cooper, and those guys did a great job organizing it. Both the Brown brothers, they're not really brothers, but they are both Browns, did an outstanding job. Our whole recruiting team did an amazing job, honest to God. And this transfer portal piece and what's become of, when we created this dead period over Christmas, and this has been 5 years ago, it was because, all right, we're done with our recruiting class. Everyone signed on the 3rd week of December, and then you catch your breath and then come back and start recruiting the next class. Well, now because of the mid-year transfer window, and then they've added this weekend where you can take transferred official visit, we just completely wrecked what was that dead period that we had created for, so now it became this year especially, and it was hard because we're going for, probably a more extensive roster flip than maybe that we'll be doing in future years to come, at least hopefully. And so I do think that there's a uniqueness to what it was that we're experiencing in this first year and some of the relationships that we had. And it just, sometimes you just get rolling and some of those start hitting bang, 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 not that you don't necessarily expect, but boy, maybe in August we weren't preparing for this kind of windfall, and then you get to the point where you can, and you got to make sure that you're still managing that roster. The NCAA still puts that cap on 85, so how are you moving pieces around the board to make sure that you're filling the needs that you need to be competitive for a championship this year, and then still balancing your roster out so that you're not penalizing future teams by taking too many old guys or taking too many young guys or something like that.
You talked about staying true to your, offensive DNA. So obviously still including significant part of the pass game, but if my math's right, you've got 5 or 6 running backs coming back. You've just added 2 more today to an offense that usually plays one at a time. Are there enough balls to go around, and do you and Coach Lashley and Coach Hall have to sort of become psychologists now for these competitive guys who all want a chance to carry the ball?
Yeah, I think the great thing that we did in recruiting is we were very honest and upfront with all these guys. I mean, it was, look here, this is the situation you're walking into. This is the opportunity to compete for what it is that you're going to do, and that puts pressure on them to, if as they're still pulling together their social environment or their academic environment and all the things that are right, it inspires them to improve all facets of their life to make sure that they're getting there. There's one back that goes in the game, but we're going. You heard Coach talk about having the opportunity to play a lot of guys. I think running backs put specifically a position where you can get to 3. We had 5 guys carry the ball last year. I don't think we want to have 5. I think that gets a little murky. But you can have 3 really downhill guys, particularly as fast as we play, and then with some third down help with what we're doing. So. There's an element of that. Always there's an element to coaching that you got to make sure that you keep these guys into it. But that's the best teams that are playing in college football right now are competitive every year. And the reason they're competitive every year is because the best players are competing against other really great players. Now you got to create opportunities, which I think we can do offensively and defensively, to make sure that these guys get opportunities to play once they've earned that. But I think what it does too is there may have been guys that played this past year more out of necessity than earned necessarily, and that's a fine line, right? And we got to be able to decipher between those two, where now we can, the more guys that we have that are capable of earning the opportunity to play pushes that competition more, and it'll make our entire team better ultimately. I think, you know, we were some positions are like that. Some positions are like the offensive line where we carried 11 guys all year, and we had 12 scholarship guys the whole season, and we're 4 under, and we just lost some guys that left, you know, with Joe and Owen and those guys. So I mean, it's in Jalen, and so I mean we're down now and back into under 10, and so that's, you saw some of those big signing class numbers are just trying to balance the roster the way we did that. That's why we took somebody like Hiram White, who's got a year to play, and somebody like PJ Williams, who's got 4 years to play, and gives us an opportunity to balance some of those roster holes that were here, that we inherited. So
Okay. Thanks a lot, guys.
Thanks, Coach.